So you've sent them the money, they've gotten it, work begins. Congrats, you've bought stock. You think it's over? No, not really.
Hello and welcome to the Open Hardware Manufacturing Podcast, the podcast about making open source hardware. My name is Stephen Hawes.
And I'm Lucian.
And today we are talking about buying stock. When it comes time to actually buy the things that you're using to sell, how the heck does all of that stuff work? And this whole thing is predicated on the idea that you've already validated the stuff. It's just about like actually talking with the vendor, buying the stuff. A lot of this is like talking about what do you want to be upfront with your vendor about, like shipping time, duties, shipping terms. A huge part of this is also how much quantity are you buying and how much capital are you tying up in that quantity.
And then lastly, we'll touch on like the legal side of buying things, that purchase order agreement and the considerations that go into it, from like what criteria does that vendor get communicated in that final contract? What do you need to include in that document to make sure your liabilities are covered? And then we'll lastly touch on like post-receival items, like confirming the goods, communicating any issues, and just getting that vendor ready to hear from you again next time.
Exactly. And like you have yet another fantastic analogy in this one about, this is all about every product in your BOM is a tin can. And it's like, how far do you want to kick the can down the road from the next time you want to purchase it? And like, how much oomph do you have behind that kick? How much money do you have to push that can down the road? Maybe you want to change a part. How much do you really want to have in stock if you're worried that part's going to change? All the stuff that goes into like deciding how much to buy, all the considerations that go into that, and actually negotiating those terms and talking with your vendor.
Yeah, per part, there's almost as many considerations in deciding how much to buy and from who to buy as deciding what part you want to get.
That's true. Like it's a whole other separate thing. It takes so much time to do it. But yeah, this was a good one. This is getting more and more into the depths of the stuff that you are intimately familiar with and had to bash your head against the wall and figure out how to do. And it's cool to hear just the amount of experience that you have pulled from a couple of years of doing this.
Yeah, exactly. I hope this one gets you thinking like a sourcing engineer, because I'm starting to.
I think starting to is not fair to.
I'm being a tease.
But yeah, this is a good one. I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So before we get into the actual bit about sourcing, everything we're going to talk about in this episode assumes that we've already validated the source. So like we've bought some units from a place, we've done a validation test in some capacity, and we'll go on later we'll probably do an episode later about like validating a supplier, a vendor.
For sure.
But everything here assumes that these are all validated. This is after we've kind of already picked a vendor, picked a product, picked a part, you know?
Yeah, and to hedge it a little bit, sometimes you're buying such an assured commodity, like a resistor, that maybe you haven't bought from there before, but you're pretty good assurance shit. You're going to get the X-Acto knife you thought you were.
Exactly. You don't have to validate like a 1% 10K 0805 resistor.
You lose your mind.
It's going to it's going to do what it says on the tin. There's some, and like screws, with very, very few exceptions, that stuff is just, it's a commodity. Yeah. It's not like a custom or weird thing. It's just what it is. So like with some exceptions, that stuff doesn't require validation, and like you can just skip that step for these things and go right to the sourcing it. But even then, I think sometimes I'll push to get in a sample, even if we kind of don't have to. It's like, I don't know. It's hard to spend thousands of dollars on something you haven't validated.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's something silly and small, it's really hard to just send a check sight unseen, you know?
For sure. It's a toughie. And like maybe even the sample was like extra good, and they made sure they gave you a good apple.
Yeah.
Instead of the rotten ones you're going to get in the big order.
Right. So the first thing with actually buying this stuff is you have to talk to the vendor. You have to reestablish communication, because ideally you've already done it if you have some samples. Maybe you aren't necessarily if it's something like a screw, but you have to kind of say, hey, I'm looking to buy something. And there's like a lot to that.
Yeah. And like for us, we had first pre-bought everything when we did the quantity 7 buy of the Lumen PMP, and we followed back up with most of our suppliers 5 months later, I think it might have been.
Give a little bit. What's the quantity 7 buy for people that didn't see that
Yeah,
video?
So when Steve and I were first getting ready to do the BYOP Lumen kit, we bought 7 machines worth of parts from each of our production suppliers to validate that things were what we expected. And it was our little baby validation of the supply chain and the quality of the components we'd receive. So we had our suppliers picked out. We knew who we'd be giving money to in production. But there was a long gap in time between that quantity 7 buy and being like, hey, we've tested your stuff. We have our packaging ready. We have our website ready. We have our sales and marketing material ready. So We had to reintroduce ourselves. Like, the name of our company had even changed.
That's true. Yeah.
Like,
Our emails were different.
yeah.
So like there was a lot there that we had to fix.
We had to assure them, like, hey, things are a little different here, but it's okay. Same people.
Yep.
And sometimes the sales rep changes.
Right.
Some of the rapport you've built can erode if you don't keep it up.
I think we even had a company not fold, but like close out, or our rep left and like went to another company or started his own, and like stuff happens.
Kelvin.
Our boy. If there's any semblance of time between purchases, stuff's going to change.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like your family can look a lot different each Thanksgiving.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, who's this new person?
that's the analogies are
I can't help it.
They're good.
But so, yeah, reintroduce yourself, reestablish like expectations and what you need and what you're looking for. If it's a new sales rep, give them the spiel again.
Yep.
I typically have a like boilerplate. This is Opulo. Here's what we are. This is what we do.
Yeah, what's in that spiel? How do you say, like, if it, let's say it's a new rep, but it's the same company, you're like, hey, I just want to buy this thing I've already bought. Here's who we are. What do you put in that?
It kind of depends on how personal of a relationship I think we'll need. Like, sometimes I can be lazy. If it's the person who sells us pneumatic coupler,
yeah,
they don't need to buy into the story. But if it's like a PCB vendor or like someone I want to customize a product, like, I try to get them
stoked on the mission.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so you have like a little boilerplate intro you'll give to them.
For sure, exactly. Yep. Sometimes it's useful to have them have confidence in us, because we might not be buying very many items. We might be buying a lower quantity than what they're usually talking to people for. But I have to assure them, like, hey, this will be recurring business. Like, the pump and valve vendor is usually selling 3,000 pumps at a time.
Yeah.
And we buy maybe 500. You just have to make sure they like us.
Yeah. Yeah. The juice is worth the squeeze. And if it's not worth the squeeze, you're nice, and they're willing to deal with it anyway. You know, like that goes a long way in repeat purchases, because every time you reestablish this communication, you're coming back with the context of, what did you tell them last time about the quantities that you're expecting to be needing? And if it's greater or smaller than that amount, that's going to be part of the discussion.
Yeah, and I'll even revisit older discussions and be like, okay, what tone did I last leave off with these people?
Right.
Did I really overcook it?
Yeah.
Did I hype these people up for like a 2K piece order, and I'm coming in asking for 400 pieces? Like,
right. Yeah.
So like, reassess like what you'd said to them last, what you think they might believe your intentions are, and then have at it.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
expectation setting is big.
For sure. I've said it before. Manufacturing is it's a lot of relationships. We can't do anything without other people. You have to get these people to like you.
Yeah.
There's one vendor, like, we talk about anime. You call each other brother.
That's so cute. Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It's good stuff. I had one guy who sent me a smartwatch. It was entirely useless on the he sent it as a gift because he liked me.
Oh, I remember this.
Entirely useless.
Yeah.
In the US telephone network.
Oh, really?
But still sweet.
Still very sweet. Yeah. They're our partners.
Exactly.
They're business partners.
And, you know, conversely, sometimes it's LCSC and you're talking into a void.
Yep. Yeah. Or you don't talk to anyone and you just buy the thing on a web checkout.
Yeah.
You know, like, sometimes that's what it is.
And that can be perfect too. That's kind of preferable.
Yeah. I mean, okay.
In some ways.
I'm trying this one on here, and like, there's a bit of a tangent, but the more that you need to talk to the person, the more validation is required for the thing. So like LCSC, no validation is required. But like, if we need to validate, and like we're talking more about a bespoke thing, that we need a custom thing, it's going to be more of a relationship. I'm trying to think about like something very, very custom. Our PCBs, we have like, with our PCB vendor, we have many back and forths with them. They're like, hey, we want to make this slight change for manufacturability. And like, it's about the custom thing we designed.
I might swat this thought down.
Okay.
To contrary points. PCBWay will take our money for any PCB, and we almost never hear design feedback.
That's true.
And then Amazon will sell us a drag chain that's the listed dimensions of what you need, but when you get it, the whole pattern's different, or like it sounds too weird when moving.
Well, I said validation.
Yeah.
I like PCBWay, we don't need to validate that board because we know the board's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't need to communicate with them. But if there's something we need to validate, then we talk to them. What was your second example?
Like Amazon. You'd think you're just getting a drag chain, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So Amazon's an exception, but like, we shouldn't be sourcing mostly anything from Amazon if we can help it.
Yeah. I even noticed on LCSC, there's a like counterfeit and fraud warning, and it's like a weather report and severity. Like, it's reported as a percentage.
What?
Yeah. There was a TI chip we were buying, and there was on the product page a 30% likelihood of counterfeit.
Wow.
So of course we went direct to source on that.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So yeah, you don't really necessarily know what you're getting.
Right.
So always do your due diligence. And
Sure.
your job as an engineer is to know that what you're buying is what you need.
Okay, well, never mind on my thought. I thought maybe I had something profound there. I guess that's
You might be onto something.
I don't know. I think it was more of just finding a trend, but either way.
I'll await your Medium article. Medium,
you mean? Yeah. So talking to the vendor.
Exactly. Yeah, talk to them. Typically, it's, again, WeChat. Sometimes it's email. Sometimes it's an Alibaba message. Those are my three. I can't really imagine much else.
Yep.
Disclaimer, if you wait too long to get back to them, they'll call you at weird hours. Sometimes that's not productive.
Why?
There can be language barriers. There can be like a factory noise in the background. You might not be
it's
in
at
front
2 a.m.
I need to be in front of a computer to really say much of anything useful to these people. And
Sure.
like, if I wait for them to call me, they're frustrated.
Right. No, they're already frustrated and you don't have the information in front of you in order to have like a meaningful conversation with them.
Yeah, I'll just say refer to my last message.
Right. Yeah.
You have to establish communications, reintroduce yourself, and then really it cuts into the negotiations.
Yep.
So we can get into that.
Sweet.
Should we have like a sample part we're talking about here?
Sure. Yeah, let's pick some specific thing, or maybe a couple, because there's a couple different things that are important. Like aluminum extrusion, I think, is a good one because it's kind of commoditized, but not really, because we care about the surface finish and we want it to look really nice and be a good profile. And there's also like shipping considerations for that. And then maybe something, what would be another good one?
Three that come to mind here, like extrusion, custom cable harness, and a stepper motor. Because with extrusion, you think you're getting a commodity and there's a set expectation, but truly, it actually needs to be communicated.
Yeah.
What finish do you want? Do you want it anodized after cut? Do you want it anodized before cut? How do you want it cleaned? How do you want it protected in transit? All that stuff we'll get into.
Sure.
First and foremost, you need to tell them the like range of quantities that you're looking to see pricing data for.
Right. We're not buying 5 million of a thing.
No.
Yeah. And like it would be useless for their sales team to get us a quote for, well, first, so there's something important here, which is talking about minimum order quantities.
Sure.
Like there are some vendors that won't sell you anything at a volume under 500 units, 1,000 units. And they won't even talk to you unless you're going to buy that many. This is all about like kind of like picking how much to buy. There's a lower bound to this. Like you can't buy under 1,000 of a certain thing. So you already know you're going to be doing that. But are you buying 1,000? Are you buying 5,000, 10,000, 20,000? And asking for price breaks there at a reasonable scale. If you ask for them like on a huge range, it's like, okay, you're a joker. You don't know what you need.
Yeah. And, you know, towards that, at the top highest level, you need to decide what balance do you want this conversation to have with the vendor. So for me, I'll take our bill of materials and the quantity per item, and I'll multiply it by 100, 200, 300, 500, and see how many of extrusion do I need, how many meters of GT2 belt do I need for different production quantities of our machine.
Sure.
And then I understand, like, okay, buying this amount would cover us for this many months, buying this amount would cover us for this many months.
Right. So that's kind of how you choose what price breaks to ask the vendor about?
For sure.
Okay.
And, like, at the minimum, for us, a purchase quantity is going to be, like, you need to have enough stock in hand to last for the lead time of new stock plus like a buffer period. For us, it's usually like we need to have 6 weeks of stock on hand for any item.
Yep.
You can get just about anything in our supply chain within 6 weeks. So for us, we want to have that. But if you're just starting out, you might skirt a little bit lower than that.
Yep.
And that's all part of the considerations we can explain on. But bringing it back, you have your MOQs, and that's the vendor's side of it. But then you have to decide how many more or less you might want than that. You can try pushing on an MOQ, and they're usually negotiable.
Yeah.
They want money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like off-the-shelf unit.
Yeah.
I think MOQs become more firm when it's like customization required.
Exactly. If you like want to get your custom logo put on a thing, or like custom packaging, or like a weird cable harness or something like that, then it starts to become like, do we have, for when we buy our cable harnesses, I'd imagine that has an MOQ.
We've been pretty lucky.
Really? Do they not have or is it like 500 units or something really small?
I think they either like us or 50 pieces is enough for them.
50?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm very surprised.
Yeah, it's
that
great.
feels very low.
Yeah. And this is a vendor who's in like the first or second page result when you search custom cable harness on Alibaba.
Yeah.
So they're probably used to it.
Yeah, they probably get a lot of people poking them for like little quantities of stuff.
For sure. And they, they charge accordingly. It's worth their time to do it. They want the money.
Sure.
This is a vendor that makes cable harnesses for MRIs. So they might be making like one harness for you.
Oh, that's fair. So that's kind of the niche they're in.
Yeah.
So based on the vendor, you might also ask for a different range of quantities. Like, will you ever ask for a price break quantity that they don't explicitly say that they support? Like, hey, could you give me one for 50 even though your MOQ is 100?
Yeah.
And just see what they do with that.
All processes and things that they list on their profile or like the product listing it's arbitrary.
Right.
Like they're not required to follow their guidelines.
There's a person that can go, we'll make an exception in almost all of these instances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, let's say they list price breaks for 99 to 200, 200 to 500. And I'm still going to ask for the price breaks at the quantities my like price analytics templates need.
Right.
Because,
yeah.
I need to see 250, 500, 750, 1K.
Sure. Right.
But effectively, if you get 3 different price breaks, I'd say, and then you can extrapolate what you're going to be looking at any given quantity.
I also see you graph them out. Maybe we talk about this a little more when we talk about how much to buy.
Yeah.
But that extrapolating them out is also cool. I see you graph them a lot.
For sure. Because there's diminishing returns past a certain quantity. So the other way to hedge it here is like, when do I want to think about this vendor again?
Exactly. Like, how much am I trying to buy for?
Yeah.
Imagine the softest sheets you've ever felt. Now imagine them getting even softer over time. That's what you'll feel with Boll & Branch's best-selling signature sheets in 100% organic cotton. In a recent customer survey, 96% replied that Boll & Branch sheets get softer with every wash. Start getting your best night's sleep in sheets that get softer and softer for years to come. Try their sheets with a 30-night guarantee. Plus, get 15% off your first order at bollandbranch.com, code BUTTERY. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
The most innovative companies are going further with T-Mobile for Business. Tractor Supply trusts 5G solutions from T-Mobile. Together, we're connecting over 2,200 stores with 5G business internet, empowering AI so team members can match shoppers with the products they need faster. This is enriching customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Yep.
We said we talked about this extrusion, stepper motor, custom cable.
Yep.
Across the 3. The Lumen's going to use 600 millimeter extrusion till the day it's no longer sold.
Yeah. It will kind of always be that.
Like, we've made that bed.
Yeah.
So we'll buy a lot. Not a shipping containers amount, but a decent amount.
Right.
The stepper motor, again, NEMA 17. But like, you never know if we want to go higher torque or switch to NEMA 23. So like, we don't want to fill a room with it.
Sure.
And then custom cable, like Steven's capable of changing the PCB on a whim, if it makes sense. So
right.
I might not want to have more than 100 machines
worth of cables. Yeah. Pretty more hand to mouth on that kind of thing.
Yeah. So think about and this is really blurring into how much to buy, but think about the liability of stock you might need to scrap if you want to upgrade your product.
Yeah. Let's just go through the rest of expectation setting and negotiating.
Okay, so you've asked the vendor for a list of quantities to provide pricing for whatever item you're buying. Mm-hmm. You also need to express a couple other things. There's lead time, or LT, you might see in communication. So do you need this product in 4 weeks? Do you need it in 6? Do you need it tomorrow? Mm-hmm. It has to be discussed. They obviously have a handling time. They have internal processes, time to get from the production line to the warehouse to pack out and ship. You need to tell them that all of this needs to be communicated. Yeah. You don't want to just go with the flow.
Is this mostly something that they will dictate and tell you what the situation is? Or is there some wiggle room? Do you request what you want and they will work around that and charge accordingly? Which direction does that decision flow?
I might see where they're at before saying what I need.
Okay.
Because they might list a lead time that's fine.
Yep.
But if it's not fine, then I might put some pressure, my thumb on the scale.
Yep.
Like a 12-day working time for a custom PCB could be fine, but maybe we scrapped half of our line's worth of PCBs and I actually need to exert some pressure and ask for expedite.
Right. And
like I said before, money can kind of do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you pay a little more, you can get things to happen faster.
Yeah.
If you really need it.
Yeah, I learned it was like a $50 expedite fee to get PCBs out of a factory like twice as fast.
Wow.
It was like, yeah.
That's the easiest $50 spend ever.
Yeah.
If we were need boards, yeah, there's cha-ching, send that $50.
Send.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lead time, see where they're at, then express your needs if needed. Mm-hmm. And it's also a good point where deliver date versus ship date is kind of how vendors will play with this a little bit. So make sure you're clear about the date you need the parts here by. Mm-hmm. Because the vendor might use slower shipping means than you'd anticipated.
Right.
So we talk about the delivery date.
Yeah.
And then they can think about the lead time and shipping, and it puts that in their heads. They're not just throwing it to a shipping carrier.
Sure. And they're like, I'm done once it hits this, but it's going to take 3 weeks on a boat to get to you. And like, that's your problem. That's not, Being communicative about when you expect to see it at your door is probably a better way.
For sure, for sure. I also say here, we need to go over the quality requirements and the packaging requirements. So once they see that you're serious, you have a lot of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
You can express like the things you need them to do. Hey, I need you to make sure each of these motors rotates counterclockwise when powered on these pins.
Right.
We need to make sure that each of these stepper motors has our logo engraved, or all these cables have connectors crimped, no loose wires, no strands of copper exposed.
Right. Yeah.
You have all the power in the conversation when you're a moment from sending the money.
Right. Yeah. And so like if we're rebuying something we've already bought, this should be more of like a reminder, right? Like if this is the first time that you're buying it, you're establishing this stuff, but this is more like if you rebuy cables, will you reestablish with them like, hey, as a reminder, here are the quality requirements that we talked about before. I'm expecting that same thing on a purchase. Or do you just say, hey, more of that, please?
Totally depends, right?
It depends on the product.
It depends on how it was last time.
Right.
So like, I'm going to bully the cable vendor. The last time we got those cables, one of the 6 boxes cables were like loose and hanging out of it.
Right. I remember this. Yeah.
I use a rebuy as an opportunity to be like, I need this done better.
Right.
Hey, this egg carton packaging for these pumps and valves was unacceptable.
Right.
It was all shattered and the pumps and valves were loose.
Yep.
Do better.
Yep. I need to see this better for another purchase. Because that's the time to bring it up, because there's another imminent purchase. And like, that's a great time to be like, hey, if we're going to do this again, I need to see this not be broken.
Exactly. Use that leverage. Get what you want, because no one's forcing you to get the money.
Right. Yeah. And there's always going to be another vendor. Like finding one that cares about quality as much as you do and is a good price. There's a million of them out there. You can always find someone else that will help facilitate that thing.
Yeah. And as we've spoken about previously, like have a second source.
Yeah.
You have way more leverage if you don't need them.
Right. Yep, that's true. And then they'll usually send you an invoice.
Yeah. So you've set expectations, you've negotiated, you said what you need. You'll get back an invoice. And then that begins like a circular loop of discussion. Like make sure the invoice covers all of your needs. Make sure it goes and touches on everything you talked about. Does it have the lead time you requested? Does it have the listed quantities you were looking to see prices on?
Okay, so an invoice will contain the price breaks, but it doesn't contain the amount that you actually want to buy.
And what I've seen here so far will typically have multiple line items for, let's say we're buying the staging plate. The vendor will include multiple line item listings for the staging plate. It will show unit pricing at each of the different requested quantities.
Weird. So the invoice isn't actually like, this is how much you need to pay me right now. It's like, here are your 3 options for these 3 price breaks. You see that often.
Yeah, it's kind of abused. Sometimes an invoice it looks more backwards. It looks like, sometimes an invoice looks like the receipt, but it's more of a bill. And you can pick which line items of that bill you want.
Oh, weird. I always thought the invoice was like, this is exactly what we're doing. Pay me this exact amount. But it's really like, then we issue the PO, and that's really what does that.
Right, exactly.
Okay, interesting. So the invoice is really the thing that tees you up to now make the decision about how much to buy.
Yes.
Okay, and that I think is probably one of the larger points here about buying stock. Is like one of the hardest considerations is how much do we actually purchase?
For sure.
I think that's arguably the hardest part of this. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I can get more time. I can make more time, but capital is finite.
Yeah. And for a hardware company, you need to spend a lot of money to get the thing to even think about making money.
Yeah.
Like you have to buy X amount. When we were validating the Lumen parts for like the V2, the BYOP release, we bought 7. And I think we bought 7 because we needed exactly 7. Like we had like a lifetime test, a production like goal for each of those 7 machines so explicitly chosen.
It was so cute.
It was so cute. And then after that, we did a quantity 100 buy because there was price breaks at that point. And like we only had so much money. And we could, I think that 100 quantity buy drank like 70% of our money. By the time we were actually selling the machine on launch day, we were like almost out of money just from buying 100. And like anything less than 100, the MOQ, the minimum order quantity, like we either couldn't buy it or the price break was so bad for like a 50 buy. Like the only reason we were able to get those 7 was samples. Yeah. We were like, hey, we just want to buy samples to validate. And like vendors are usually pretty amicable to that and you pay through the nose for them. But in comparison to, the price break.
Yeah. For reference, I think the quantity 7 buy If you turned it into like the per machine cost, it could have bought us 15 machines at the 100-piece quantity.
That's egregious.
Yeah.
But like they're boxing up a box for us with only like 7 things in it. Like that's so silly for most of those vendors.
To that vendor, like it's just as easy to ship 2 motors as 200.
Right.
They don't want to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
So you saw the invoice and you're now deciding how much to buy and how to buy it. Let's take the staging plate. I was sent an invoice for it an hour ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, these are imaginary prices, but one price was for 250 piece and one price was for 500 piece.
Okay.
The price at 250 piece was like $12, and then the shipping was $800.
Okay.
The 500 piece was like $11.40, and the shipping was $1,500.
Yeah.
So I just amortized the cost of the freight, the cost of testing, if there is one. You see that in PCBs a lot.
Yep.
And I divide it back to get the per unit cost to have something here landed.
Right.
And like the difference was like $15.50 versus $14.40.
So it's like not a huge difference.
Do we want to save $1 and change per piece, but spend twice as much?
Right. Yeah. Like literally double the amount of capital that's out. And like, but it depends.
Yeah.
Like, and also, how quickly are we going to drink 250 of those things? Like, if in 3 weeks you're like, I need to do it, then we're probably making enough money selling those 250 to afford spending the capital on buying 500 of them. But like, if you get that kind of quote back, you know that there isn't a huge pressure to buy the 500 unit piece because there isn't a crazy price break for buying that much more. We've kind of maxed out. We've hit the point of diminishing returns on a price break with 250 units.
Yeah, so I bet you can guess which one I bought.
Did you buy 250?
Yeah, it's just not worth spending as much as the 500 piece.
Right. And if you have more capital than God and like you don't care about cash flow, then buy 1,000. If it's something that you know that you're going to have a lot of, you know, but like in general, that $1 per unit isn't going to move the needle as much as like having all that capital freed up to do something else.
Yeah, exactly. And even just the peace of mind of having an extra couple grand in the bank.
Right.
You need it.
Yep.
Now, the left field hook here is both of those prices were for air freight.
Right.
We use staging plates at a certain quantity per month. We don't need more than a certain quantity delivered within a period of time.
Right.
So it's kind of negligent to get 500 pieces air shipped to us at once.
Right. Like maybe we were paying 15, 20 or whatever you said per unit at 500. But if we were to sea ship them, they'd be like $10 a piece.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So what I might do when I see that price at 500, I'll look at the air freight shipping cost component of that price and then see, okay, well, I actually only need 100 of these 500 for the month of November. The rest can take 8 weeks to get here for all I care.
Right.
So then we can go, okay, well, if we had them ship 100 pieces air, that would be, I don't know, $300 to get that here. And the rest can go, the other 400 pieces will go by sea for $300, $400, $500.
Right.
It's like, okay, well then now the staging plate's $10 a piece.
Yeah.
I'm not a calculator, by the way. These prices are
Yeah, just made
winged.
up. Yeah. And what that does is it saves you more money per unit, but you're still tying up more capital because you're still buying that 500 quantity piece, but it's just a fair amount less expensive than it would be air. But by doing that, like there's something we say to each other a lot of like, if we're hemming and hawing about buying a quantity and we decide to go to the bigger one, we go, we're going to sell them. Like we know we're eventually going to sell them.
Yeah.
And we're not like worried about capital. Like we have enough cash to keep going without question. So it's like, maybe this just makes it so you don't have to repurchase for a long time. And it's okay if we tie up a little capital for the insurance policy of knowing we have it and saving a little bit of money per unit by putting it on water shipping it. So it's all about that trade-off of like, do you want to tie up a lot of money? And in the early days, we wouldn't ever lose money on a sale, but we would not make as much money per machine sale and airship everything because we just cared about the flexibility and the design was rapidly changing. We would like constantly be putting in air shipments, just getting in stuff like quick lead time. You were constantly doing repurchasing because we wanted to stay flexible and we didn't have nearly as much cash in the bank. And we wanted to be, you're not going to be nearly as efficient, but that's okay when you're starting. And later on, you can start thinking about, okay, we'll put some on the water.
Yeah, being literal about it. Like it was not worth having more than like 100 pieces of a Lumen motherboard at a time because they could change.
Yeah.
We're getting all this great feedback from the community. We want to be able to apply it.
Right. If you have something really stable and you have a ton of money to put into it, save money per unit. If you know you're going to sell a really stable thing and you have the capital for it, invest some of that maybe not all of it. It's still not great to type a lot of capital into inventory, but invest it. And then you know for sure you're going to save money per unit. But that's the risk, right? That's the calculation, is like how risky versus how much do we want to save money. It's hard.
Yeah. And I got 2 more points on that. Like, we always have some assurance like, oh, if I bought too much extrusion and we want to change stuff, I could sell it on Amazon for us.
Right. That's true. That's a whole other angle, is, just because you bought it doesn't mean like it necessarily has to go into a machine. Like the secondary resale market is a thing for recouping. You probably may not make money on it, but like at least we're recouping most of that expenditure.
Yeah. Don't think of inventory purchasing as spending money that went down the drain. It's just transferring it into a different asset.
Right.
And you could think of that, you can play that game a little bit more easily if it's a basic commodity. Like Opula could sell excess NEMA 17s on Amazon all day.
Right.
Custom cable harnesses for our Lumen PMP? Not so much.
Not so much. Yeah. So those things that are more generic are a little easier to buy larger quantities of, because we know it's we could just resell if we really had to for some reason.
Yeah.
If we bought way too much. We actually have a box in the back room that's like stuff to resell. A lot of it's probably Rev 3 motherboard components, like electronic components that we just like don't need anymore. I think we've actually been pretty good about that.
Yeah. For everyone listening at home, if you want to feel less bad about your own box, ours is worth about like $3,000.
Is it really
yeah,
only worth?
It's not that bad. There is probably $3,000 in cardboard for BYOP sitting on a shelf.
Yeah, that was an early too high purchase.
Yeah.
We bought so many of those boxes. I think we saw a really spicy price break for those boxes, and we're like, oh, we want the good price break, and we bought way more than we will ever use.
And it came with a notice that the price was going up by 12% for corrugated cardboard.
Right, so we got in early, and now we have more boxes than we know what to do with.
Yeah, rip. Now, another thing to touch on here when deciding how much to buy is, what's the riskiness of your supply chain? Do you think that vendor is going to go out of business? Are you married to them? Does that vendor suck to talk to? And an important one was, early in our time here, it was silicon shortage.
Right.
So we would buy as many as LCSC had for like a high-end IC like the STM32.
Right. Yep.
It was a matter of getting as many as we could get our hands on. And we were spooked about like the political climate in Asia. So like we'd buy a year of ICs because we didn't want anything over there affecting our ability to ship product.
That's a good point. If there's something that's like, I know I cannot get this anywhere else, like it's single sourced, it's hard to get, that is worth tying up a lot of capital in, because it's an insurance policy. It's almost like literally an insurance policy. You're making sure that if you have that product in-house, you can guarantee that you will be able to ship product and make money. But if you don't have that thing and there's no other way to get it, you're done. Yeah. You can't ship your product, or you have to like redesign and like completely usurp your plan, and like it's kind of non-negotiable.
Yeah.
It's some things you just have to have enough of.
We try to make it impossible for a vendor to turn off our fulfillment.
if one company can make a decision that, no thanks, we don't want to do business with you anymore, we're not doing our job. We need to make sure that someone can just dip out from being a vendor for us, and we still can continue to facilitate the machine. That's kind of dual sourcing, or having enough stuff in stock that we'll have time to find a second source by the time we run out of inventory.
Exactly. Like vacuum sensors and cameras come to mind there.
Yeah.
Like if we had to figure out a new vacuum sensor, it's going to take us a long time. So we're going to keep 8 months of that on hand at like a minimum.
Right. Yep. Yeah, because that's the amount of time it would take to, that's true. And we're also lucky that some of those things are not terribly expensive to get a lot of, but sometimes that's worth spending a lot of money on. To have that, like, it's an insurance policy though. It's a peace of mind thing. If you want to be super risky, you could, and you're willing to just like do crazy stuff to adapt, you could always do that. But that's not really how we play it.
Yeah, any change to the product, if it's user facing, has to be it can affect docs, it can affect the user experience. It's kind of nice to keep those critical things stable.
Right. Yep. Keep that standard, something we know we can rely on.
Really, we touched on a lot of the purchase decision making there. So there's MOQ, there's like tying up capital. We could speak a little bit more towards the stability of the BOM item. I think we honestly did, talking about like PCBs, custom cable harnesses versus the stepper motor.
Yeah. Like there's some things that like, I think we just had one of these conversations last week where you're like, hey, is this going to change soon? And I was like, I don't know, it might. And you're like, I forget what it was, and you were like, okay, I'll only buy some of it then.
Yeah.
And that was really good to know, especially if it's something that you don't have really high MOQ on, you can get away with it. And have we ever timed a release based on stock out? I don't think we really do that too much. It's more like based on when we know we can release, we plan purchasing. That's kind of the direction the decision's made.
We've been pretty good. Most of our changes are cognizant of inventory, but I think inventory follows what we want to do.
Yeah. And if there's something where it's like, oh, surprise, extrusion actually needs to be 700 millimeters long, and we have like tens of thousands of dollars tied up in inventory and aluminum extrusion.
It's just bad product planning.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit bad product planning, but also maybe we do a dual variant for a while so we can, use that up, or like that's still part of the consideration.
Yeah.
You still have to think about what you have on it. And that's why it's nice to be lean, It's nice to only have X amount in stock at a time so you can make that change. But if it's stable, it's like, we buy a lot of 600 millimeter extrusion. We know that's going to be the same thing for like the lumen's lifetime, Or if it changes, we're going to have so much notice. We'll have so much time to be able to change that and buy a 700 millimeter or whatever it is,
A cheeky thing you can do, let's say you use Amazon or McMaster-Carr, you can just return it.
That's true.
McMaster-Carr lets us return anything we didn't need.
Yep.
No return window, no communication. You just mail it to them.
Yep.
Amazon, with a little bit more hassle, you can do the same thing. If we had to get like a thing from them in a pinch, you can just return it.
And it can be okay in a pinch. But like they'll change stuff. The quality is not known. There's no person you can really complain to. Like, and the price is usually like crazy good in comparison to like Alibaba stuff. Like Amazon is spooky close to pricing for like direct to manufacturer sourcing. Is that fair to say?
It is. And I think it's truthfully because it's a lot of the same vendors.
Yeah. I think they're just reselling on Amazon as another way to like hit a different market.
An AliExpress vendor might have a warehouse in California that the same junk ships out of.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just like Temu for the US market.
Right. Yeah. But it's so inconsistent. Like the thing that you really get by doing proper sourcing and like going to a proper vendor is the consistency and someone you can call and be like, hey, this is not what I need. What are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
And Amazon's not that. You might get a random, totally different thing in the mail. I think it's okay for like some emergency stock or like something while you're getting your feet under yourself for like a proper vendor. If that's kind of like your hot fix, fine. But it's not a good long-term solution.
I don't want to bash on it as much as that.
Really?
You shouldn't be buying a motor from there, but like Scotch 3M double-sided tape.
Okay, fair. Yeah, like there's some things like that.
And like,
okay, that's a good point.
I've priced it out side by side. We can get flush gutters from Amazon for the same price as AliExpress, and it's here in 2 days instead. Sometimes it's like illogical. Mm-hmm. You don't know how it can make sense, but for
what
really
you get,
low risk things, I don't question it.
That's a good point. That it depends on the thing. Like if it's mission critical stuff, no. but if it's something like that where like if we had to suddenly resource, we could do it no problem. Like let's say you did decide to get flush cutters on Amazon, and that's where we got them, and then that seller just stopped showing up, or like the quality started to get really bad, and we had 100 of them that sucked. We could return them to Amazon, find a vendor on Alibaba, get samples in and get them going like within a week.
For sure.
So like it depends on your risk management and like what's the thing you're buying.
Like where do you care to spend your time?
Right. We touched on this point a little bit earlier about like if you need 100 units now but you still want to save money, you put 100 in the air and 500 on the water in terms of shipping. Like you airship 100 and then 500 do that. You can also kind of do that for your vendors. This is something that you discovered early on that has stuck in my brain, and I love this strategy where like you buy bolts from McMaster-Carr for your first order quantity because it comes next day, and you can think about it so last minute and get 1,000 of a kind of bolt in, and you're going to pay a premium on it, but that's okay because you're shipping the hardware. And then after you've hit that steady state and you like have a second to breathe and you have inventory in hand, and it was expensive, but at least you have it in there and you're able to ship, then you start finding a vendor for your bolts, Yeah,
exactly. You realize which bolts stuck around, which bolts you needed, which finish did you care about the most? Did you hate the silver? You want the black oxide, stainless steel, what have you?
Yeah.
You learn what to care about.
Exactly. Like when you're first starting out buying that stuff, worrying about saving every single dollar per unit in terms of BOM cost is not the best use of your time. The best use of your time is shipping something and getting feedback on it. You can always cost down later. You might make a little less money per unit, but like engagement and making some money is way more important. And you can always make things cheaper down the road. And you're constantly doing this. You're finding like, oh, we bought this from McMaster-Carr for the past 8 months. Let me find a vendor for it. And then we get a good vendor and they're, consistent and same quality, but a little better price.
Yeah, there will always be a low-hanging fruit. There will always be a couple pennies you can save somewhere. You're not going to get it perfect out the gate. So I don't really try.
Yeah.
It needs to be reasonable. Mm. We can't be offensive. We can't be wasting money. But
we have to make money on the
We
thing.
have to get something out. It's just really imperative. And you don't want to go slow, like you said. Imagine if the quantity 7 buy was C shipped and the quantity 100 buy, the first one for BYOP was C shipped. We'd still be waiting for
Exactly. And people were chomping at the bit for a kit. We did everything we possibly could to just try and get stuff out. And we paid air shipping for everything. We just like got it in so we could start shipping and start making money. And then we started worrying about getting that profit margin to be higher so it's like sustainable and we could start thinking about hiring someone or paying ourselves or that kind of stuff.
If we presume that an amount of lumens will sell per month for the foreseeable future, it's imperative to get that out sooner than later.
Yeah.
You'd rather turn on your revenue stream as fast as you can.
Exactly. Yep.
I don't want to wait 3 extra months to start making money to see ship one. Like, I'd rather have been getting that recurring revenue stream.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you make a little less total profit, you have an extra month of being on the market. And like starting earlier and getting that stuff out is always better. And if you don't think you're going to be recurring selling those products, you should probably have some market research or like some hope, at least some reasonable expectation that you do. Or B, believe it more even if you don't think it's true, because you kind of have to believe it when you're starting something like this. You have to operate under the assumption that part of it is going to work, because if you don't, you're pulling too many punches.
Yeah. The CEO at Farm Labs had a really good quote. He was, you could decide when people buy your product, but you can't decide when they stop buying it.
I don't ever remember him saying that. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think his point was get it out there because you don't know when the window of it being relevant to the market is going to close.
Will close. Yeah. Yeah. If you have to make a little less profit because you're paying, as Lucian says, the idiot tax, which is a phrase we use a lot of like, I'm paying money because I was a dummy. And I like, if I didn't plan ahead and I have to pay like an expedite fee, that's an idiot tax. I love that. But like, if we have to pay an idiot tax on getting it in early, and this isn't, we're not idiots by doing this. I think this is actually very smart to do it this way, but like we're paying a fee to get it quicker, to get out to market earlier. That's an excellent way to play it early. And you can always cost down later, but you can only get things out as soon as possible, you know?
Don't waste money, but make your money work for you.
Exactly. Yep. And getting out early is a good thing. It's good to get out there as soon as you can. Start testing stuff. Failing quickly if you realize no one gives a shit about this. If you start realize no one gives a crap about this thing, then doing that immediately before you waste a ton of time waiting for sea shipping and stuff, just get something out there. Doesn't matter if you don't make quite as much money on it.
Yeah.
That's a huge point.
Maybe even buy 50 machines instead of 100 if you're unsure of product market fit.
Right. And honestly, we could have bought like, we sold out of that first 100 in like an hour.
Yeah, we should have gotten more.
We should have bought more, but we weren't sure if we would sell like 4 machines or like 400. We had or 4,000. Like we literally had no idea what it was going to be. So we got the cheap, and we also couldn't have afforded buying. Yeah, we had to do this. We couldn't have afforded to buy even a 200 piece unit because 60% of our money was tied up in that first quantity 100 buy.
Yeah, and probably a lot of people listening are ready to interject and be like, wait, what about? I think I know what they're going to say.
Okay.
We could have launched with a lead time good enough to buy everything on launch day, but we didn't want to. We wanted to have machines in stock that day.
That's a good point. Like if you have enough capital to get a sample build and you get them in and you do, as Lucian and I did, the quantity 7 buy.
Yeah.
If we can get those in, validate the parts, and know that you can just say to the vendor, hey, we got more money, it's time to go. You can just do that pre-order and buy that stuff then with a lead time. But we wanted to have them available shipping same week. And that was really nice.
You can negotiate for net 30 payment terms.
What is that for someone who doesn't know?
With net 30 payment terms, you can pay for the goods within 30 days of receival.
Right.
It's going to be very hard to do if you're just launching your hardware product.
Yeah.
Like no vendor in their right mind is going to give it to you. But if it's a recurring buy, or it's like your new launch of a product, probably more feasible thing to request.
That kind of lets you pay for the stuff with the money you made for selling it.
Yeah.
It's like putting the cart before the horse in kind of a cool way.
It's like a pre-order for the supplier.
Yeah. And it helps with cash flow a lot. Especially if you're going like batch purchasing or something like that, it helps quite a bit. So yeah, that's a huge point. How much to buy is like one of the hardest questions to answer, and we're constantly like, I don't know, like what's going to change? It's hard to say.
We always wish we had some algorithm that just told us.
It would be nice.
But the algorithm is
us going, like that Larry David gif where he's like, he's unsure. That's what it feels like every time. Like it's all just depends on the risk trade-off that we choose to do for that part.
Yeah. One more point on it is our forecasted consumption is a huge part of deciding what to buy.
Oh, that's a really good point. And so that's something that you have in Aligny, right? Which is our inventory management.
Exactly. But it's a value you can do on a scratch pad if you didn't have an inventory management tool. But it's forecasting consumption, just looking at a component that you use frequently and figuring out based on projected like sales amounts or production batches, like how much would you use in 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And that's kind of where I'm at most of the time here purchasing now. It's like, I don't care to buy anything in less than a 3-month amount, unless it's like a very bespoke thing. And I'll look at like the cost to have 6 months of it. And then I look at the cost of not needing to think about this for a year. That's like the best to me.
Right. Yeah. If it's something so stable or like cheap per unit or easily resellable and it's also not a lot of capital tied up in it. We could just buy a year's worth.
Yeah. I almost think of every component in our supply chain as a can, and I decide how much I want to kick it.
I mean, it's kind of true. How far do you want to kick the can down the road? Because you're just going to have to rebuy them again later.
Yeah.
That's fun.
I shouldn't negotiate buying staging plates every 10 days.
Yeah, that's such a waste of your time. That's such a waste.
Yeah.
That's funny. I like that. Everything is a can. I really like that. That's good.
Yeah. And like sometimes I didn't buy enough, and the guys have to figure out what to do and work around it. And that's okay.
Yep.
You don't want to be irresponsible enough to like hamper production, but It's nice to be just in time with it.
Yep. Playing it a little close is not the worst, because it means we can just change something so quickly. It's so nice. If we need to make a change on the line, the next week we are building a brand new thing. And we're going to maybe not make quite as much profit on it, but we can do it. And we don't have so much inventory sitting around that we're like afraid of doing it. You know, like being afraid of making changes stinks. With an open hardware thing that's easily configurable and people are giving us good feedback, we want to be able to change it. And having a lot of inventory in-house means we're inherently resistant to making changes, which stinks.
Yeah. Like I just got back from the East Coast RepRap Festival, and I saw a room full of printers that had really advanced motors installed on like closed loop servos and all these like brushless configurations of machines running like Duet firmware. It was super cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to be married to a warehouse of NEMA 17s.
Exactly.
Not to say we're making that change, but it's the idea of it.
Yeah. If we decided, hey, this is important for what we're making, we should feel like we can just do it and not be like, oh, but we have so many motors in stock. What are we going to do about them? Like, once the product's stable, having a little bit more inertia to the design is okay. And it's expected, because that's how you get the better price breaks. That's how you save more money, make more profit per machine, and make things more sustainable. But for when you're still like letting the thing settle and coagulate, I'm going to keep using that word. I love that word. It's good to keep it trim.
For sure. So that's a lot on how to buy stuff, how to think about buying stuff.
Yep.
And what we found to work for us. We always give it the funny asterisk of it depends.
It so depends.
Here's our considerations. It's a game of juggling.
Yep.
You just got to keep the balls in the air. You got to keep things arriving, got to keep things shipping out of your warehouse, your factory, and pay the right price for things that make sense for you.
Yep. This is what has come from, I mean, you were on the manufacturing team at Formlabs, and I think so much of what we do is informed by like what we saw there and what we liked and what we didn't about how things operated there. So that's our context too. And that they were very different in that they did not manufacture in-house like we do. So some of it is from learned experience of like what did they do, and some of it is I've never worked at a company that made units in-house before like this. Like I've never done that. So this is a lot of this is just brand new of like what we found to be the meta from personal experience and not prior experience, like trying things out. So yeah, it depends. That's just the context of where we're coming from on like what we've decided works well here, but you might find something works better for you.
Yeah. And for those making open hardware with a CM, it's a little different.
Yeah.
You might find that your supplier or your CM manages this stuff and you get to throw it over the wall.
True.
You'll probably help with the high value critical to quality components. You'll help them in purchasing them, but you can also make a lot of this their problem. If you're in the situation where you need a CM or you have one, you could make them deal with this.
Right. Like, I don't think anyone at Formlabs was dealt with like sourcing screws. The CM will handle a lot of that kind of stuff for you. But like you said, the more critical stuff. And this was much more, I did a lot of like validating a second source part at Formlabs of like, hey, we want to get this in. Is this going to work the same, equivalent to what we already have? But I bet you did quite a bit more of working with the CM on this because you were actually on the manufacturing team.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We didn't give a rat. I'm not going to say that word. Yeah,
this is a Minecraft, or what's
this is a Christian Minecraft
This is
server.
a Christian Minecraft server, yeah. Yep.
Mitchell's going to clip that for sure. For example, like we didn't care where the screws come from, like you said, but the linear motion, we told them where to buy we practically bought that for the CM.
Right. Yeah.
But there's no CM for us. But it's worth expressing like what that might look like if you're in that situation.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. Because what you're doing now is you're not spending money on the CM. You're not spending money on the parts. You're spending money on a CM contract saying, hey, I need you to be able to make 50,000 of these a year for me. And that's a very different cost now. Like, we are so lean with our expenses. Cash flow is like so chill for us because we sell machines, we turn around and we buy more machines with it in the whatever quantity our capital affords us. But for a CM, you have to have like many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on a contract. I was thinking 50,000 units, but like tons of money to even start.
Let's take like a desktop speaker. You're paying for that factory to make the injection molds, buy the initial stock, have their production engineering team build all the jigs and fixtures and pogo test jigs that you might need. You're paying probably a deposit on securing the labor. You'll eventually segue into paying per finished good, but like it takes a lot of capital to prime the pump, so to say.
Totally. Yeah. So like a lot of this kind of only applies to people doing their own manufacturing. Like some of it probably is also like how much to spend money on. Like I don't know if Formlabs or like other companies that use a CM thought much about like how much, if they were buying a linear rail, were they actually buying it? Were they just telling the CM how much to buy? Like I know you can buy stock and send it to the CM for usage. So some of it might apply, but like this is heavily focused on like what if you're doing manufacturing in-house, you're building your own thing.
At the CM, you might be considering like they might charge you per square foot on warehouse storage fees at their facility.
Right.
Like they might charge you based on how many finished goods you have sitting awaiting a C shipment. Mm-hmm. Like maybe you have to pay $100 per unit per month to store it for it to ship out via sea.
Right.
Not that crazy a number actually, but it's always just a balancing act. Your situation may vary, but these types of considerations are going to be there.
Yep, for sure.
So we've talked about how to buy, we've talked about how to talk, and then now it's like how to pay.
Yes.
And there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you have an invoice. You've selected the line items on that invoice you wanted. Mm-hmm. You've given feedback on it. You've gotten verbal confirmation that what you're asking for is okay, maybe with or without your changes being met.
And you know plus or minus 5% how much it's going to cost.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot. We charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
And then you have the PO. And I should define it before getting further into it. Purchase order is a legal document form used by a buyer and sent to a supplier for an order. A purchase order specifies items, quantities, prices, credit terms, we'll get into that, for a purchase from a vendor. It's a legally binding contract when a vendor accepts the purchase order.
So this is like in the books, we're doing this. Not a verbal confirmation, not a Alibaba message. This is like this is happening.
Yeah, it's a legal contract.
Yeah.
Like there's international business case law around purchase orders.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, like it's not just a napkin agreement. It's binding. It's a binding contract.
Sure.
And when they accept it, that's it.
Yep.
Sometimes you'll find that you have to get a returned signed copy from the vendor acknowledging it. Mm-hmm. That's pretty standard here. But the PO is the only thing that matters.
Okay.
All prior discussion can get erased. Every invoice you'd seen doesn't matter. It's all about what that PO said.
Right.
And the PO is going to touch on a couple different topics that hopefully you'd pre-negotiated, and there should be no surprises because you, the purchaser, is the one that writes this.
Yeah. Yep. So you write so many POs.
Yeah. We have a couple hundred out now.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty rad.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
I should probably just take it line by line.
Yep.
Now that we've defined what a PO or purchase order is, we can talk about like the other criteria that it needs to touch on. So there's payment terms, and that's like, how do you pay them? When do you pay them? Is it cash in advance? Are you paying 100% of the bill before anything is done at that vendor? Are you paying net 30? i.e. you're paying within 30 days of receiving everything. There's another form where it's 50-50, where you pay 50% upfront, and then 50% is paid either upon goods being ready to ship or upon goods being received or within 7 days of goods being received. There's a lot of different strategies here.
Do you ever like really try and force one? Like if you really need to keep cash flow, to keep cash in hand until you have an opportunity to sell the thing that you've purchased, net 30 is nice. And I think we kind of started shifting into net 30 because it's kind of a standard thing, but like we also didn't really do it for a long time. Is that fair to say?
To get net 30 terms, it usually actually involves a credit application.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Like if we don't pay net 30, we can be sent to collections.
Yep.
The business needs to have assets worth something.
Yep. Yep.
To be considerable for that. Like in the credit applications, you have to list vendors you do business with and say what terms you're on with them.
Right.
And they're allowed to contact them and ask if you're a good payer.
Sure.
I typically try to get it if and when possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's handy. We could afford to not. It'd be fine for our circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's generally always better to defer payment if you can, especially if you have your money in some type of investment vehicle. Like if you're doing something that accrues some percentage interest, the longer you have that money to do it, it's always better to defer your payment. Just like it's always better to defer taxing.
yeah.
You know?
At the same time, I don't want to have to remember to pay a vendor 30 days after getting a box.
Right.
So I have to put things in place for myself to be held accountable. So like typically in our payment processing tool, I will put the bill in and coordinate it to be paid in 30 days.
Yeah.
Like immediately, or I'm going to forget. And I can't take Opulo's credit because I forgot to pay a bill.
Exactly. As soon as that stuff comes in, it goes into a system that makes sure to catch that stuff.
For sure.
Yep.
And that's handy.
Yeah.
Our payment processor is neat because we can make any bill net 30 if we feel like it. It just has a fee attached to it.
Oh, like they pay on our behalf immediately and then we pay 30 days later, but with some interest?
Yeah.
That's cool. It's like a 30-day loan on a bill.
Yeah. It's like 4% interest rate. Yeah.
Oh, that's egregious. But if you need it, it's like, that's some breathing room.
For sure.
Wow. That's cool. I didn't know that we had that in there.
We use Ramp for anyone listening.
Yeah, it's great.
Referral link in the description.
Yeah, if you want to click on the affiliate link for my beauty skincare routine, get ready with me. Link in the description.
Yeah. So I said net 30. I said cash in advance. Those other types, look them up. Select from a list. See if the vendor finds it acceptable. Also see what they have to say. Sometimes this is not negotiable. Mm-hmm. We have many vendors where we still pay cash up front.
Yeah.
Cash in advance. And I'm not going to make a fight out of something they're not going to budge on.
Yep. Or sometimes we'll even pay like half before work starts and the other half upon them shipping or something like that.
Exactly. That 50-50.
Yep. Yeah.
You'll typically see it written at 50-50 TT. I don't know what the TT stands for.
But that's what it means.
Yeah. I think the TT stands for wire transfer.
Oh, yep.
So that's the payment terms. And then delivery terms need to be touched on here too.
Yep.
You'll see a couple different ones. And these are like, it's a way of defining the responsibility to get an item from one place to another and how that responsibility, as if it was a baton, transfers from seller to receiver.
Right. Like where is the transfer of ownership of like, I did my part, now it's your job to get it the rest of the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. There's 20 different ones. Opulo here only thinks about 3 of them that I can speak towards. There's X work, which is the vendor has your stuff at their door and they say, come get it. Typically, our vendor is in Asia, so that's rather hard.
Yep.
It might be conducive to you have a shipping agency that picks up stuff from neighboring factories to palletize it for you or to fill a container for you.
Yep.
It's a handy one if you want to see the price of something without the shipping, without like their handling fee. It's a good thing to know, but at least for us here in America, getting stuff like air freight half the time, it's kind of an irrelevant number.
Yeah.
Then there's DAP, delivered at place, which is it's their responsibility to get it to your door, but customs is your responsibility. I'm sure I'm fudging it a little bit, but that's roughly it. They're responsible for it getting delivered, but it's your job to pay any bills that come up in the transit.
Because of like duties and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, duties, countervailing duties, anti-dumping,
yep.
all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
If you're in a different country than the USA, I'm sure it looks a little different, but everyone has customs, unless you're in a free trade agreement zone, something like that.
Yep.
And then DDP, which is kind of like the gold standard for white glove treatment. Delivery, duties, paid. So that's the vendor does everything. They're even responsible for the guy that brings it into your front door.
Yep.
Technically.
And they've paid for the duties to get it in through the front door as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I prefer the DDP or DAP. Sometimes a vendor is charging too much for the responsibility of handling everything.
Yep.
Sometimes it's like a no-brainer to give them that responsibility.
Yeah.
They have means of getting things to your door that others may not.
Right. Yeah. Or like they have like an insanely good rate with DHL or some shipping company because they export many millions of dollars worth of material a month. So they have an insane rate. And there is no world in which this is more for like who's actually paying for the shipping cost, which isn't one of these three because we kind of never consider that. But the vendor knows how to ship stuff well. The vendor always knows how to get stuff to your door really efficiently. And like, if they're charging a good fee for it, it's kind of fine to have them just do DDP and like trust that they're going to own it and take something off of your plate.
Yeah, like let's say our vendor is Samsung Industrial.
Yeah.
They mastered how to get something from anywhere for the lowest amount possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Just let them do it.
Let them do it. Let them do it.
If this is a vendor that's not used to sending things abroad, you're one of the first like English-speaking clients of theirs.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going to be bad at it.
Mm-hmm. Or just not as cheap. Like maybe they don't have a good rate or like it's confusing. They don't have a clean process or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's worth putting up with for the price.
Yep.
But it depends.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends.
So that's delivery terms and then delivery timelines. So like we mentioned earlier, when setting up expectations, you need to have the delivery due date in your PO.
Yeah.
If you don't have this, you have no accountability.
Yeah, it's true. And this is the day that it arrives at your door. Like the day that it arrives at your facility, not the day they ship it, not the day they put it in there, but the day it shows up, right?
That's how we play it, but it's up to you to say that.
Because that's what we care about.
Yeah.
And if it's DDP, if it's truly DDP and their responsibility is like delivery, duties paid, they're handling all of getting it to us, it's within the scope, you know? Like if we had different delivery terms where like when it's in international waters, we hand off the baton, then the day that it arrives at our door is not their responsibility. But if it's DDP, that's what we're expecting, is that it's going to arrive at our door because that's where the baton is handed off when it's literally already in our hands.
Yeah, you got it exactly. And towards that, like list the working time and the shipping transit time that you're expecting if needed. You can be as pedantic here as you need to be to have the assurance. It also is a matter of how much you trust this vendor, how repeatable are they. Ultimately, if you don't have the box you need, you don't have the box you need. So like what you put here doesn't matter. Make sure you're using a vendor you trust, because if you don't have it in hand, that's your problem, not really theirs.
Exactly. Yep.
And then towards that, also list the shipping lane. That's to say, like, what shipping route is something to take. Mm-hmm. Say you have a preferred shipping lane.
Yeah.
You want air freight via DHL.
Yep.
Say that.
Yep.
You were probably quoted for your preferred shipping lane anyway.
Yep.
So your PO should say who's shipping it and how.
Mm-hmm. Like, let's say you really don't like a shipping vendor, or like, you know that they always drop it off at a different place down the street, or like, who knows what it is? Like, you don't like the fact that they don't track the thing as well and you can't see the granularity. You get to specify that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in specifying it, it gives you leverage. If they send it a cheaper way that's supposed to be the same in their eyes, you can yell at them when something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you don't specify what you want, you don't get to be mad about it.
Yep. Yep. But if you send a PO and they sign it, that's the agreement. They don't have to sign it.
And then finally here we have like the money payment method.
Right.
The vendor will accept money in a multitude of different ways. If you're paying on Alibaba, you have the choice of paying by credit card. You have the choice of paying by Alipay. You have the choice of paying by wire transfer. And if you're not on Alibaba, you have all those same options, except you don't have Alibaba Pay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Vendors kind of prefer wire transfer. Yeah. I think payment processors like Alibaba have a fee.
Yeah.
So you can go off platform and do wire transfer if you prefer. Mm-hmm. It's really up to you. Wire transfers take a couple of days to get there. So I typically show the vendor a screenshot of the transaction being placed on my end. Thankfully, they're pretty trusting, and they begin work within hours of receiving that screenshot, even if it takes a few more days to get the payment.
For the money to go through.
But pay attention and see if your vendor is a stickler and they want to see the money in their bank account before they begin work.
Sure.
If that's the type of game you're playing with a vendor, then maybe pay credit card for that first 50%.
Yep.
And you'll pay $50 per 1,000 on that fee, but you're getting them to start work days sooner. And that's worth it.
Yep. It can be.
I'd pay $50 per day to reduce the lead time most times.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And wires are, if you have a domestic vendor, you can send like an ACH wire transfer. But if it's an international, which is pretty likely that you'll have some international vendors, you have to send a SWIFT wire transfer.
Yeah. Do you want to describe that?
You're definitely going to correct me on some of this. I'm sure I'll be incorrect. But ACH is like a domestic American wire transfer between bank accounts. SWIFT is for international. And they're a little bit more involved. You have to give a little bit more information and stuff. I think do they take longer? They probably take longer than an ACH wire, right?
It depends on if you want to pay a transaction fee for expedite or not.
Okay. And it took us, like, you can either do a whatever bank you use, they have some information. Like sometimes they have a portal for like doing a Swift wire transfer. Our bank actually didn't let us do it without going into the branch to do a wire, which was wild. So then we paid for this service that they have where we can do it online, which is imperative and like easy money to spend. So you don't have to drive to the bank every time you want to send.
Yeah.
That's just silly. And then also there's payment processors that will also do it. I don't know does Ramp do Swift?
Yeah.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's probably where we do most of our
everything.
Okay.
So unless I'm being lazy.
That makes it really, really easy then, because it's kind of a pain to use. Like if you try and use a bank's interface website, they're not usually the best.
Yeah, we put up with it for a year and a half before getting like a nice tool.
Yeah.
And it sucked.
Yeah, it was kind of crappy.
Yeah, it took like it was like launching a nuclear weapon. Like it took 2 keys. Like Steve and I had to share each other's like login accounts just to like authorize anything.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. But now it's so much easier to do it through a payment processor. So if you can get a payment processor to do it, Ramp is great. You can spin up credit cards with it, and like you can send wires and like put in invoices or POs and stuff like with net 30 terms. It's good to have a place to manage all that stuff, and it's going to be a better tool than whatever your bank has.
For sure. So you sent them the money, they've gotten it, work begins. Congrats, you've bought stock. You think it's over? No, not really. The post receival, let's just jump to you got it.
Yeah.
You paid customs if they emailed you for that.
And you paid DAP.
Yeah, all that.
Yeah.
Post receival, you need to confirm the goods as soon as you can. And then you need to communicate if there's any issues immediately.
Yep.
A vendor will tell you to pound sand if you communicate issues about something you got 9 months ago.
Right. As they should.
Yeah.
Your time to bring that up has come and gone.
Act like you have 30 days. You might have more, but like if something's messed up, you need to let them know.
Yeah, you usually do it within the hour of receiving something. You'll be like, this is messed up.
Yeah.
And then you draft an email.
For sure.
It doesn't happen that often, though.
Not really.
No.
Sometimes you might not know about an issue until you've worked through all of the stock. Like we have a vendor that was giving us a component that had like a 10% fallout rate for quality.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring that up at the time of repurchasing because I send them a photo of a bucket of them in the bad bin. But if something's egregious and apparent, immediately bring it up.
Yep.
Because if you pay to Alibaba, you have an amount of time to appeal the order, get some money back. Like for the vendor, their money is in like a
escrow.
Yeah, escrow. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have rights.
Yeah.
So don't wait on them.
Right.
The longer you wait to exercise your rights as a buyer, the harder it is.
Yep. And you bought that stuff expecting it will be good.
Yeah.
You should be able to get that stuff and have it work well. That's the relationship that you're building. You know, like you're also setting tone of like, I'm expecting that the quality should be high for the stuff that we buy from you. It's expectation setting, and it's like you're setting precedent for your relationship.
It's also helpful if you haven't paid them for like 50% yet, or if you're on net 30, you don't have to pay before the quality is what you expected.
Right. If they didn't do what they said, if they didn't send you 5,000 units, they sent you 4,000 units and 1,000 pieces of, non-working object. They didn't fulfill the PO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you pay them for 80% of it.
Exactly. Yep.
And you offer to let them pay the shipping cost of getting 20% back. So just realize when you have leverage, when you have power, and hold tight of it.
Yep. Because hardware is hard to make money on.
That's why they call it hardware.
That's why they call it hardware. And like sourcing this stuff and making sure that you don't get nailed on a vendor thing is like the difference between making money and not, if it happens enough.
You never want to have to send like an apology email to customers letting them of like a quality issue. Like it's our job here making sure that never goes out.
Yep.
It's our job in making sure they're never alerted of stock out or like a lost package.
Yep.
You just have to plan.
You got to plan for it.
Another thing I wanted to touch on was like the big boy version of the purchase order. It kind of didn't fit into the flow here, but it's worth mentioning. Maybe you want to discuss buying a lot of something, but you can't afford it.
Right.
Maybe you know you're going to be needing it for the foreseeable, inevitable future. There's something called a planned purchase order where you can pay for something with a recurring delivery rate. So maybe we're talking about cameras here. Opulo knows we might need 10 million of these cameras, but no one can afford 10 million of them. We might say, hey, these numbers are fake again.
Yeah.
We will pay for 10,000 of them at a time, delivered every 6 months. They have in their books this recurring revenue they can take to the bank. They can use it to get loans to secure the stuff on their end to buy as many cameras as we're asking for over a given recurring period of time.
And we also have some assurance that there will be 10,000 cameras available for us to buy every 6 months.
Exactly.
Like it's also like supply chain security as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
What you'll typically see, there's no typical here actually, but what I've seen so far when we play this game is you're paying some 2-digit percentage of the order up front, maybe 20 to 40%. And then you pay for the pieces as they're delivered.
Okay.
So it can be a big number.
So does that mean that the first 40% of the units they ship to you without you having to pay, and then when you hit to that 50th percent, then you start paying the amortized price?
No.
Okay.
Imagine like we're paying the 20% the value of 10 million units. And then that's like a deposit to secure this blanket PO.
Sure.
And then we pay for 10K units at a time as they're delivered.
Okay, but it would be still less than the actual price of 10K because we've already paid 20%. So it's probably just like a discounted rate. We pay 80% the price of that 10,000. Okay.
It's all going to come up in the contract.
Sure.
You'll see how that money gets amortized, but there is usually a deposit involved here.
I see. As they come through, you pay.
Yeah. But it also lets you be buying these units at a rate that's way higher quantity than you would have possibly have afforded otherwise.
Yeah, so do you get the price break of the highest volume of the total order?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. I wasn't sure if maybe they wouldn't be amicable to that because you're doing it distributed, but it's kind of like you're quote unquote buying that many. I mean, if you sign a PO like that, that's a legally binding document saying that you're going to buy all those things. So like, I guess it does make sense you get that price break.
It's also the way of the vendor giving you a price break for a quantity they can't make within a regular period of time.
That's true.
Like if I ask this camera vendor for 10 million units up front, they can't make that within
6 months.
within their standard working time.
Right.
So if they want to give me a price break,
a super good one.
Yeah, they're going to quote it within the delivery window that actually matters,
right.
Which is kind of the cool part about this. I don't actually need 500 staging plates the moment they all arrive.
Right.
I need 10 a week or something.
Yeah.
So a blanket PO is actually talking about things pragmatically and how they're needed and when they're needed by.
Yep.
And that's kind of handy.
Yeah.
You have to be at a certain volume for it to be worth anyone discussing this.
Sure.
Companies might even have a lawyer look over this. It's a more serious contract. It's
sure.
It's not a game.
Yeah.
They look at this as a huge liability. What happens if the purchaser goes out of business or they want to cancel it or they want to up-rev a component in the middle of a blanket purchase order agreement? Like,
exactly.
Any of these things. You have to be very mature about asking for this and know it's what you want.
Yeah. I don't think we've never done this, right?
I've gotten it as a quote.
Yeah.
Exactly for cameras, but
yeah,
it's not worth it.
Yeah. It's tight. It's a huge, it's almost like signing a lease.
Yeah.
You have an upfront deposit and then you're promising you're going to pay X amount of money indefinitely. And like, it's locking you into having to do something. And if you're starting a hardware company, you kind of want the flexibility.
Yeah. And I've seen these contracts have like a term for voiding it. Like there's a penalty.
Yeah.
Because you do need a way out.
Yeah.
It's business. Some shit changes.
Yep.
But it's an anchor around your leg and you might not want that. Maybe you want the security. The vendor is legally required to fulfill this item per month for an amount of time. Yeah. It's a great way to like pay for something on subscription.
Yeah. Like if you're Toyota and you need the microcontroller for the dash computer, like that's kind of where I imagine this kind of PO happening. Like a silicon manufacturer signs this as the vendor for a multi-billion-dollar car company.
Exactly.
Because like there cannot be a world in which they do not have these chips. But if you're like a fledgling hardware startup, it's probably not the best move for you to be, focusing on that.
Yeah, and it's great you bring up automotive. In many markets, automotive manufacturers are legally required to provide 20 years worth of replacement parts for any car they sell in the country.
Yep.
So any supplier is required to provide parts for up to 20 years. And that blanket PO probably exists for that part. And it probably has a tapering rate.
Sure.
It's 1 million units spread out, 50% within the first 5 years, and the rest tapering down to 0.
Sure.
All that type of stuff. It all comes down to the legalese.
Yeah. But that's the big boy stuff. It's not likely, like, we probably won't sign one of those for many years.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I could see it'd be kind of cheeky of us to ask for that with our PCB vendor if it was like not talking about a particular circuit board, but it was saying, hey, we'll pay this price per square millimeter of circuit board over time.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'd be amicable to that because they still have like to amortize the setup cost. We might like totally... There's a world where someone could abuse that by like giving them 47 different designs.
Yeah.
And there's all the setup costs for all the different boards. But like there might be something like that where it's like something we know definitively we will be
pretty
buying.
assuredly the first time it's going to make its way into relevancy is with packaging.
Right. Yep. Because that's stuff that takes up so much volume and you want it spread out. If you have all that stuff in house, it just takes up so much square footage.
Yeah. It's way preferable to have the vendor drop off 50 Lumen boxes a month rather than us hold 500 of them.
Right.
We don't have space for it.
Yeah.
And they don't want to make 500 and have them all delivered in one day. It's annoying for them. They'd rather spread it out. So yeah, be aware of planned purchase orders. It's a tool in the tool belt like all this other stuff.
Yep. Yep, totally.
The complete opposite of just buying it on Amazon.
It really is.
Actually, they had to have subscribe and save.
That is so cursed. Like how we buy like office snacks like Goldfish. Do the same thing with like, can you buy an STM32 on Amazon? That is the most cursed sentence I've ever said in my life.
You can get the dev board with a breakout PCB if you like desoldering.
That's some desperate.
We looked at that in the middle of the chip crisis.
We really did.
The dev boards were cheaper than like the LCSC price for like a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were more obtainable.
They were way more obtainable.
Sad.
It's so weird. Buying stuff is so weird.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense. Sometimes the options in front of you choose themselves.
Yep.
It's just a tricky stitch, and it's your job to be thoughtful about it.
Yep. Make sure you're not having all kinds of money tied up in inventory.
Yeah, we think of money as the gas in our car. The money we use has to get us where we want to go. Ultimately, like we buy the amount we need to get where we want to go.
Yep. Yeah. A lot of the quantities will kind of become self-evident after a while. When you don't know how much you're selling, it becomes a lot harder. But you toss some of this stuff in a spreadsheet, you start to see where it makes sense. Like, if I have the money for it and I feel this confident about it, can I hit this price break? And if you can, you save more money per unit. And the bigger you get, the more quantity you buy, the more you save per unit. Like, it's just about growing in that way. So you save more money in your BOM cost per machine that you sell. And, it just takes time to grow to that point. But eventually you get there and you start buying much, much larger quantities, a lot more than 100 piece purchase now. And then off you go.
Yeah, I remember the first time I sent a payment that could have gotten like a new Toyota. My hands were shaking.
I remember, dude, there were some nights where like I'd be asleep and you're up talking to vendors at like 2 or 3 a.m. and you're like, hey, just so you know, there'll be like tens of thousands of dollars missing from the bank account when you wake up.
Yeah, we didn't get robbed, man. We didn't
get robbed. We just bought inventory and like, don't freak out about it. And yeah, checking the bank account the next day and like that much money missing is like, it's weird. But like sometimes that's what you have to do. That's how it goes.
Which is nice to spread it out, but
it is nice to spread it out. Yeah, as much as you can have that not be a huge financial hit to your books, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff.
I hope y'all learned something. I'd love to see the questions you got. Every single sentence here could have been elaborated on for an hour.
Yeah.
People get PhDs in this topic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we got the YouTube University plus. Well, that's not fair to say to you because you spent a ton of time researching this and you also had a lot of exposure to this at previous jobs too.
And I've worked with some really smart supply chain engineers.
And multiple different hardware companies.
Atish, Joel, Nikki, some people from Foreign Labs were awesome mentors on this stuff.
Yeah. They know their stuff.
For sure.
All right, folks, so that is it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts on Google Podcast or Apple, whatever the hell it's called. Don't forget to leave us a review wherever you get your podcast. It helps us out a ton for people finding this podcast, listening to it, and getting it spread out to more people. You can find Opulo on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also, don't forget to check out opulo.io and sign up for our newsletter, where we write blog posts and do customer interviews with other folks building open hardware. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, guys. See ya. Maybe you hate FedEx. You probably hate FedEx.
We'll cut that out as much as it's true.
Leave it.